What's up, my friends? This is Tracy Allen, and I am back. And we're going to continue to talk about Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. And we're starting off we're still in chapter one, but I'm picking up where I left off. And I'm going to finish chapter one today. So get your little cup of coffee, cocoa, soda, water, tea, whatever it is, and join me. So we're going to pick up where I left off, and I'm going to start with like the last part that I finished. Talked about this young lady had picked up the pink razor so that she could go ahead and start shaving this gentleman. So she says she's reflecting back. She says, when I woke up that morning, I hadn't expected to shave any corpses. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I expected the corpses, just not the shaving. It was my first day as a crematory operator at Westwind Cremation and Burial, a family owned mortuary or family owned funeral home, depending on which side of the United States you live on. Mortuary, funeral home, potato, places for the dead. Okay. I leapt out of bed early, which I never did, and put my pants on, which I never wore, along with steel-toed boots. The pants were too short and the boots too big. I looked ridiculous, but in my defense, I did not have a cultural reference point for proper dead human burning attire. The sun rose and I walked out of my apartment on Rondell Place, shimmering over discarded needles and evaporating puddles of urine. A homeless man wearing a tutu dragging an old car tire down the alley, presumably to repurpose it as a makeshift toilet. Now, I never knew that that's what people do with those tires. So, anyway, when I first moved to San Francisco, it had taken me 3 months to find an apartment. Finally, I met Zoe, a lesbian criminal justice student offering a room. The two of us now shared her bright pink duplex on Rondell Place in the Mission District. Our home sweet alley was flanked on one side by popular taqueria and on the other by Esta Noche, a bar known for its Latino drag queens and deafening ranchero music. Making my way down Rondell to the BART station, and that is, if you're not familiar with that, that is the it's a train system in San Francisco. A man across the alley opened his coat to show me his penis. "What you think of this, honey?" he said, waving it triumphantly at me. "Well, man, I think you're going to have to do better." His face fell. I'd lived on Rondell Place for a year now. He really would have to do better. From the Mission Street stop, the BART train carried me under the bay to Oakland and spat me out a few blocks from Westwind. The sight of my new workplace after a 10-minute trudge from the BART station was underwhelming. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting the mortuary to look like. Probably my grandmother's living room equipped with a few fog machines, but from outside the black metal gate, the building seemed hopelessly normal. Eggshell white, only a single story. It could have doubled as an insurance office. Near the gate, there was a small sign, "Please ring the bell." So, summoning my courage, I complied. After a moment, the door creaked open, and Mike, the crematory manager and my new boss, emerged. I had met him only once before and had been tricked into thinking he was totally harmless, a balding white man in his 40s of normal height and weight, wearing a pair of khaki pants. Somehow, in spite of his affable khakis, Mike managed to be terrifying. Assessing me sharply from behind his glasses, taking inventory on just how big a mistake he had made in hiring me. "Hey, morning," he said. Hey and morning were flat, indistinguishable under his breath, as if they were meant only for him to hear. He opened the door and walked away. After a few awkward moments, I decided he intended for me to follow. You ever have that happen? You're like, do. Oh, I guess I should go with that person. So anyway, I stepped through the entryway and turned several corners. A dull roar echoed through the hallways, growing louder. The building's nondescriptive exterior gave way in back to a massive warehouse. The roaring was coming from inside this cavernous room, specifically from two large squat machines sitting proudly in the corner like Tweedledum and Tweedledee of Death. They were made of matching corrugated metal with chimneys that stretched upward and out of the roof. Each machine had a metal door that slid up and down, the chomping mouths of the industrial's children's fable. These are the crematory machines, I thought. There are people in there right now, dead people. I couldn't actually see any of these dead people yet, but just knowing they were nearby was exhilarating. So these are the cremation machines? I asked Mike. They take up the whole room. You'd be pretty surprised if they weren't the machines, wouldn't you? He replied, ducking through a nearby door, abandoning me once again. What was a nice girl like me doing in a body disposal warehouse like this? No one in her right mind would choose a day job as a corpse incinerator over, say, a bank teller or a kindergarten teacher. And it might have been easier to be hired as a bank teller or a kindergarten teacher. So suspicious was the death industry, a 23-year-old woman desperate to join its rank. I had applied for jobs concealed by the glow of my laptop screen, guided by the search terms cremation, crematory, mortuary, and funeral. The reply to my job inquiries, if I received any replies at all, was, well, do you have any experience? Any cremation experience? Funeral homes seem to insist on experience as if corpse burning skills were available to all. Taught in your average high school shop class, it took 6 months and buckets of resumes, and sorry, we found someone better qualified before I was hired at Westwind Cremation and Burial. As a little girl, I would lie awake for hours waiting for my mother's headlights to appear in the driveway. Convinced that she was lying broken and bloody on the side of the highway, flecks of shattered glass stuck to the tips of her eyelashes, I became functionally morbid, consumed with death, disease, and darkness, yet capable of passing as a quasi normal schoolgirl. In college, I dropped the pretense. And let me pause there for just a second. Remember, she lost her mom in a car accident. So that's the reason why she's picturing her mom looking like this. Okay. In college, I dropped the pretense, declared my major as a medieval history, and spent 4 years devouring academic papers with names like necrofantasy and myth, interpretation of death amongst the natives of Pago Pago, Dr. Karen Baumgartner, Yale University, 2004. I was drawn to all aspects of mortality, the bodies, the rituals, the grief. Academic papers had provided a fix, but they weren't enough. I wanted the harder stuff, real bodies, real death. Mike returned, pushing a squeaky wheel gurney bearing my first corpse. There's no time to learn the cremation machines today, so you can do me a favor. Give this guy a shave, he requested, nonchalant. Apparently, the dead man's family wanted to see him one more time before he was cremated. Motioning for me to follow, Mike wheeled the gurney into a sterile white room just off the crematory, explaining that this was where the bodies were prepared. He walked over to a large metal cabinet and pulled out a pink plastic disposable razor, handing it to me. Mike turned and left, disappearing for the third time. Good luck, he called over his shoulder. As I said, I hadn't expected the corpse shaving, but there I was. Mike, though absent from the preparation room, was watching me closely. This was a test. My introduction to his harsh training philosophy, sink or swim. I was the new girl who had been hired to burn and occasionally shave corpses, and I would either A, be able to handle it, or B, be able to handle it. There was no hand holding, no learning curve, no trial period. Mike returned a few minutes later, stopping to glance over my shoulder. Look here. No, in the direction his hair was growing. Short strokes, right? When I wiped the last bits of shaving cream from Byron's face, he looked like a newborn babe, not a nick or razor burn in sight. Later that morning, Byron's wife and daughter came to see him. Byron was wheeled into a Westwind's viewing room and draped in white sheets. A floor lamp fitted with a rose colored light bulb cast a calm glow over his exposed face, far more pleasant than the harsh fluorescent bulbs in the preparation room. After my shave, Mike had worked some kind of funerary magic to close Byron's eyes and gaping mouth. Now, under the rose lighting, the gentleman seemed almost serene. I kept expecting to hear cries from the viewing room. Dear God, who shaved him like this? But to my relief, none came. I learned from his wife that Byron had been an accountant for 40 years. A fastidious man, he probably would have appreciated that close shave. Toward the end of his battle with lung cancer, he couldn't get out of bed to use the bathroom, let alone wield a razor. When his family left, it was time to cremate him. Mike rolled Byron into the mouth of one of those behemoth cremation machines and turned the dials on the front panel with an impressive dexterity. 2 hours later, the metal door rose again and revealed Byron's bones reduced to glowing red embers. Mike brought me a metal pole with a flat rake on the end. He demonstrated the long strokes required to pull the bones from the machine, and what remained of Byron fell into the waiting container. The phone rang. It boomed loudly through the speakers in the ceiling, installed specifically to hear over the thunder of the machines. Mike tossed me his goggles and said, "You finish raking him out. I gotta grab the phone." As I scraped Byron's body out of the cremation machine, I saw that his skull was still fully intact. Looking over my shoulder to see if anyone, living or dead, was watching, I carefully inched it towards me. When it was near enough to the front of the chamber, I reached down and picked it up. The skull was still warm, and I could feel its smooth, dusty texture with my industrial grade gloves. Byron's lifeless eye socket stared up at me as I tried to remember what his face had looked like as he'd slid into the flames just 2 hours before. It was a face I could have known well after our barber client relationship, but that face, that human, was gone. Mother Nature, as Tennyson said, is red in tooth and claw, demolishing every beautiful thing she had ever created. Bones reduced to just their ignorant elements by cremation became very brittle. As I turned the skull to the side for a better look, the entire thing crumbled in my hand, the shards tumbling into a container through my fingers. The man who was Byron, father, husband, and accountant, was now entirely in the past tense. I got home that evening to find my roommate Zoe on the couch sobbing. She was brokenhearted over a married man she had fallen for on the recent backpacking trip to Guatemala, a blow to both her ego and her lesbianism. "How was your first day?" she asked through her tears. I told her about Mike's silent judgment, about the introduction to corpse shaving, but decided not to tell her about Byron's skull. That was my secret, along with the strange, perverse power I had felt in that moment, the skull crusher of the infinite universe. As the sound of the ranchera music from Esta Noche blasted me to sleep, I thought of the skull lodged in my own head, how it would one day emerge after everything that could be recognized as Caitlin, eyes, lips, hair, flesh, was no more. My skull might be crushed too, fragmented by the gloved hand of some hapless 20-something-year-old like me. Wow. Okay, so that ends chapter one. And I want to share with you guys, last week I had the opportunity, well, it was mandatory, at a meeting with my company. All of us had a little field trip to one of our crematories. And there's so much that people don't realize that goes into all of this. And so when you're looking at pricing, you just have no idea The amount of people and work and everything that goes into all of the cremation that happens. And it's not just the cremation. As you saw, Caitlin didn't even know that she was going to have to shave somebody, but all of the things that people do, it counts. It's time. And a lot of times there's more heart that goes into it than you realize. So at the crematory, we have a gentleman who's been helping us for the last 15 years, and his name is Jose. And someone asked, so what made you get into this business and what made you stay? He answered it as we were wrapping up, because they asked this question early on, and as we were wrapping up is when he said, okay, and now let me answer this for you. And I won't go into all of that because it was a long but very powerful and very moving answer. But he originally went into this industry because he was trying to prove a point. You know, the main thing, he wanted to get a job and he wanted to show his girlfriend that had left him that he could do something. He could work someplace. But the more he continued to do it, the more that he was taking care of the dead, it just became something that was more than just cremating people. And again, I can't even go back and recall everything that he said, but by the end, we understood his heart. And most of us were tearing up, if not some people wiping tears, if not some people just visibly moved by what he shared about how much this means to him. So when you are getting cremated someday in your life, if this is what you choose, understand that there are people that are approaching this with more heart than you can imagine. Not all the time, right? Because we don't know everybody's heart, but this gentleman shared his, and I thought it was super powerful. So I wanted to share that with you guys, and I hope that you enjoyed this first chapter. So the next time I come back, I will start chapter 2. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, and I shall see you the next time. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Ciao for now.